Hello, this is Rabbi Juan Marcos Barjona Gutierrez, and in today's video, I want to talk about a book which is very important to have in your library. If you're interested in the world of Sephardic Jewry, if you're interested in the historical experiences of Sephardic Jews, and more specifically crypto Jews, then the book that I'm going to talk about shortly is indeed something that you should have in your library. Many of you know that many years ago I was a member of the Society for Crypto Judaic Studies. I was actually a board member for several years, and I was actually an assistant editor for one of its principal publications, Halapid. And I have several articles that were published in Halapid, and then in the, I guess you could call it the sister journal, the journal for Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian crypto Jews. And I say all that as a preface to the fact that the book that I'm highlighting is written by an individual that is very much related to that organization. The book is titled To the End of the Earth, and it's, I'll put it here in position, Stanley M Hortis. Dr. Hortis was the sort of the co-founder, if I remember correctly, with Rabbi Joshua Stampfer for the Society for Crypto Judaic Studies. Dr. Hortis was more the academic side. Rabbi Stampfer, interestingly enough, was also a lecturer professor at the Spertus Institute, although that was before the time that I studied there. Dr. Hortis has often spoken about his experiences in New Mexico as a state historian and how many individuals came to him in the midst of his work and they would tell him about Jewish practices that they observed. And it was sort of odd because he wasn't looking for this information, but they would share Jewish practices, people lighting candles, traditions that they had about other people, sort of almost in an accusing fashion. I know this person is from a Jewish background, and he was intrigued about this. And as he studied this, he began to realize that there was indeed a historic connection between the individuals in New Mexico that were coming to him, and a community that originated in what we call Nuevo León, in New Line, the Nuevo Reino de León, the New Kingdom of Lion, a land grant that was given to a very famous individual, Luis Carvajal. And so the book that Dr. Hortis writes focuses in on the migration of crypto Jews into northern Mexico, conversos into northern Mexico, New Spain, and then eventually the migration of some of these individuals into the northern reaches of what we would call the Spanish Southwest, into New Mexico, parts of Colorado. And that's sort of the focus of the book, this particular community in New Mexico. But what Dr. Hortis does is he provides good amount of information on the historical context, of course, the background of Sepharad, of Spain, of the Iberian Peninsula, and the existence of Jewish communities there. And then he talks about the discovering the New World and the arrival of these individuals and the eventual flight of these individuals, in many cases, to these northern reaches that I talked about. And so it's a book that anybody that's interested in the crypto-Jewish experience, especially in the New World, should add. Many other books typically focus in on the peninsula, which of course is important since it's the starting point for the crypto-Jewish experience. But this is one of the books that focuses in on Mexico and specifically New Mexico. But it's something that you should add to your library. What I want to do in future videos is I want to highlight books that are part of my library that I think are critical to those who are interested. This book was written in 2005, so it's one of the more recent books that's been written about the topic in this specific area. A lot of the books that were available about crypto Jews and the Sephardic experience in Mexico are somewhat dated. That doesn't mean that the information is invalid, but the great work that was written back in the 1970s was Seymour Liebman, The Jews of New Spain, or The Jews of New Spain, if I remember correctly. And he also had an accompanying volume called The Writings of Luis Carvajal, the Enlightened. And so there was a lot of material in the 70s, but there was older material back into the, I think in the 30s and 40s and so forth, some in Spanish and some in English. But this is really beneficial because it's up to date for the most part, and it's a tremendous resource that you should always have if you're interested in these areas. In the future, what I want to do is I want to highlight specific books that address the historical aspect of crypto Judaism, and then also look at some that are not directly related, but maybe impact the issue of crypto Jews that are returning to Judaism, to sort of understand how the issues of identity play into this. I was interviewed recently by the Israel Bible Center, and we actually started the discussion on crypto Judaism by talking about my thesis, my master's thesis, which was on the Second Temple period. And I explained that the reason that I was so drawn to that, for various reasons, I'm very interested in the Second Temple period, but one of the critical issues for me was the issue of identity and how the idea of Jewish identity came into being, sort of the transition between what we would call Israelite identity into Jewish identity. And then, the different components that make that up. And the reason I thought that was important, because if you look at the experience of crypto Jews, especially in Mexico, certainly in other places in the peninsula, so forth, the idea of Jewish identity was often very different in their minds than what we are used to. So if you read the stories of individuals that were arrested by the Inquisition and some of the accusations that were levied against them, these individuals often thought that certain practices were reflective of Jewish identity, of Jewish experience, and religious thought, and in many ways they're not directly related. And so this evolution, this transformation is interesting because they're drawing from different sources. And so what I want to do in the future is look at some of the elements that contributed to that sort of complicated identity, as I always refer to it. If you'd like to help me out, you can go to my website, cryptojewisheducation.com. There should be a link there. If you follow the link, it'll take you to Amazon. If not, you can go directly to the End of the Earth on Amazon. Also, I'd like to remind you to press the like button and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel. I really think it's important. There are individuals that are contacting me from a lot of different places throughout the world. Venezuela, I've mentioned this before. I've had people from Cuba, Mexico. I think I've had some people from Puerto Rico, some other places. And it's always small groups, but they always come in. And part of the endeavor here is to try to make that information readily available to them. That's why I do things in Spanish and English sometimes, which is sort of a learning process for me. But if you enjoy the videos, like the videos, sign up, and help us grow this channel. And I will bring you another book that I recommend in a subsequent video. And I'll see you then.